This is the Big Fish Cares podcast. Big Fish Cares podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
Good morning, afternoon, or good evening. I'm not sure when you're listening to this, but that's okay. I wanted to briefly talk to you guys about what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the summer with the podcast. I'm going to be filming a lot of these from my home office, so that way there's flexibility with my schedule, vacations, and different things I need to do. And we're really going to be interviewing all the people that I've met in the NFT space. And you're probably asking, what's NFT? And you've probably been seeing me post about it on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. Most of you guys probably follow me on Facebook. Most of you have no idea what it is. I still don't really understand it all the way, but that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to meet all the interesting people that I've gotten to meet over the last year in the space, and they all have cool stories just like you and me. They're just regular people. There's nothing to be afraid of. And we're going to get started with our first guest. He is a Hangout Hawk, and you're probably like, what's a Hangout Hawk? We'll probably get into that. But I met him in the Gary Vee project, VeeFriends, and his name is Jonathan Tame. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thanks, Benny. It's good to be here, bud.
Yeah, this is fun. You're the first Hangout Hawk that I've done a podcast with. So, caw. Yeah, caw. Yeah, that's the sign. Why don't you tell everybody really quick for context? What's a VeeFriend? What's an NFT? What's a Hangout Hawk?
Yeah, and I don't know that we really talked about this, but I'm happy to go into any level of detail. As you and I kind of talked over the weekend at VeeFriends, I spent some time at Deloitte and I helped build a blockchain practice for them. I'm a co-author for the blockchain playbook for federal government. So I can go real deep or we can keep it real surface. But I think VeeFriends, so first and foremost, everybody's got to understand that this is basically Gary Vee. For anybody who doesn't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, just go do a Google search. There's no shortage of things that will acclimate you to his world and him as a personality. But VeeFriends is kind of the perfect marriage of technology and personality. And Gary kind of just exploded his personality into these little miniature characters that each represent kind of a character trait or some interesting tweak on how we as humans behave and the way that we think. And a lot of what he talks about is very community focused and very sort of recognition that we are tribal as creatures. We crave to belong to groups, and so in his creation of these NFTs or these collectible digital tokens, he added an extra dimension to that if you own a particular token, you get to hang out with other people who also own that token, and sort of kind of created these digital tribes. And one of those
micro communities.
Yeah, micro communities. And one of those micro communities is the Hangout Hawk, and that is, I'm a little jealous of your artwork there. That's pretty dope. So that is a collection of 125 tokens, and I think there are a few of us that own more than one. I don't, but there are a few Hawks that own more than one. But there are only 125, and that group gets together on a pretty regular basis. We have Zoom calls every week. In fact, we just came off of one. And while we were at VeeCon, we had this huge, dinner party, like 4 hours, and everybody got together and got to hang out and kind of meet in person. And then, of course, there are a number of other groups. I missed out on the Gift Goat group, but I think you're in the Gift Goat squad there, Benny.
Yeah, I was an early adopter. I got in right in May. That's when he launched. But I've been watching Gary for, I don't know, probably 7-8 years. What was your experience with Gary Vee? How did you come to find out about Gary Vee and then also this project?
So I'll rag on myself a little bit here because I suspect that my story is probably not that unique. But I've been following Gary since the early days. I knew about Gary when he was doing Wine Library TV, and as he explains it, when he looked like a terrorist in a cave in the middle of the desert. And I thought it was, so I'm a technologist. I was tearing apart electronics and building computers and taught myself how to program when I was a kid, and sort of always stayed. Everything I've done has always had some technology aspect to it, or I've tried to bring a technology aspect to it if there wasn't already. And so I was early on YouTube, thought it was fascinating, was really kind of plugged into, I thought that it was, I love to learn. I'm infinitely curious. And so the second that the internet, like it was immediately apparent to me that the internet was a way to get access to all kinds of knowledge and information. And, that's crack, right? Like I was addicted immediately. And then, it didn't take long. Gary was really early on YouTube, and it didn't take long to sort of be like, oh, this is fascinating. This dude's breaking down wine for the common person, like, telling you what it is, and then he would rate it, and he'd be like, this sells for $27. It's a $12 bottle of wine.
It was totally just whatever he felt like saying at the end. It wasn't like he was like some like wine aficionado or connoisseur. He just worked in his dad's business for all those years. Probably hung out with enough rich wine snobs that he learned enough, and then used his own flavor, put it all together, and out spits like this rating, kind of like what the Barstool guy does with the pizza.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that? like where he does like the 1 bite challenge, where he like takes one big bite and he's like, it's a 9.2.
Yeah, it's brilliant, right? So, I've been an early Gary follower. I have all of his books.
How old are you, for context, for the people listening to the podcast? Because a lot of people think this NFT stuff's just for young people. How old are you?
I'm 42.
And I'm 40. So just so you know out there, and we met a lot of people at VeeCon that were much older than us.
That's right. And much younger than us. So it's much like the internet. It's very inclusive. Anybody that wants to play in this space can play in this space. The barrier to entry, there's a technical component to it still. It's a little difficult to set up your wallet to do it correctly, and buy some Ethereum or ETH, get into the ecosystem. But there are no shortage of guides on the Web 2 stuff, right? The YouTubes and the Googles, and you can go find this stuff out. There are numerous communities that are very welcoming, just like the VeeFriends community. No shortage of people that'll help. But to your point, Benny, of all ages, I think people are able to leverage NFTs, and Web3 is gonna. I used to give talks when I was at Deloitte doing the blockchain stuff. I had this blockchain 101 talk, and inevitably there was always a question about, what's the future of this Web3 stuff? And the answer is it's just the internet. It's just the next internet. That's it. At its most basic function, this is what the internet's going to evolve into.
Isn't it the way we connect? It's like the way we connect on the internet, right? It's not necessarily, the internet's still like the same. Like there's still going to be like the same signals coming into your house. Like it's like the cord might get faster, the cord might get better, the wireless might get better, but you're still at its core, you're like still using a computer. Yes, there could be like maybe a headset on you one day, but like again, it's really the way you log in with like your tokens, and then you connect. It's more transparent because that's what the blockchain is all about. It's less malicious, right? It can be less malicious, but I'm sure that it'll get more malicious, right? I don't know. It's probably just like everything else, right? Like there's good and bad to both, right?
So this is a good segue into, we probably should define for people what we mean with Web3, right? Like what is that?
Yeah, like what does Web3 mean? First, you know what? Before we do that, because I keep these podcasts kind of short. Let's do a quick background on who you are, like because they're probably thinking like you're some super genius, and I actually think you are, but. When I look at you, you're just a regular guy like us, but you have an interesting backstory. So go ahead and give us a 5-minute background on Jonathan Tame.
Cool. I'll try to keep it short. I've done a lot of stuff. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of opportunity presented to me, and I've tried to take advantage of as much of it as I can. So, if we start my origin story, I actually was born. My parents were living in a trailer park. My dad was working. He was a printing press operator in a little tiny town called Mattoon, Illinois. And if anybody knows where that is, I'm sorry. and he married my mom. They were like 23 when they got married in this little town. And my dad, they moved into a trailer park together and had a single wide trailer. And I spent the first 3 years of my life growing up in this trailer park in this little tiny cornfield town in the middle of Illinois. And then my dad, was putting in the work and rising through the ranks and really demonstrated himself to be a good manager, and started to take on more responsibility. And so he and my mom decided to have some more kids, and so my middle brother came along, and at that point the trailer was a little small, so they moved into a house, and so I spent 18 years growing up in this sort of bubble of a town in the Midwest, and really learned. I was fortunate enough that my dad liked technology, and we had a computer early on. Like I remember playing around on this old 8086, with floppy drives, and I was into text games, and Adventure Island was I think that's what it was called.
I remember Prodigy. Do you remember Prodigy?
Yeah. The early days, right? The
Yeah.
AOL online stuff.
AOL, yeah. And then you'd hear the modem and the sound of the modem, and it would take 30 minutes for a JPEG to download, but when it did, you're like, whoa!
Yeah. So it was so cool. In high school, I actually got to help build the computer lab in our high school, and they had a I think it was a T3 line, and that was like 3 megabits per second when your home modem is like 24.4 or 28.
Yeah, we thought it was fast.
Right?
I remember a 14.4 modem.
Yeah, right.
Right, so my dad seemed like he was your dad. Like, right, they were tinkering, and then when they were out, like I would be tinkering. I'd be tinkering in the office while he was outside, not knowing that I was tinkering with it, and I would start learning how stuff would work.
Oh, I messed up so many things. My dad loves to tell these stories about how and we had early video games. I was a big, I loved Sierra, the computer game company Sierra. I played King's Quest and Space Quest and Police Quest and Ultima, the early days of Ultima. But I would installed a King's Quest game onto the A drive. Like, I don't even know how that's possible, but wiped out our discs. My dad had to go send them back and get new ones. So, but the great thing was my dad never discouraged me. Much like Gary says, I think I was the product of really fantastic parenting, and my parents, there's a clip going around on Instagram, I think, of Jordan Peterson saying something like, you can't interrupt kids doing dangerous things carefully. And that perfectly sums up how my parents and my grandparents, I lived in a town where both the grandparents on both sides of the family were all in the same town.
Yeah.
So cousins. I had
you probably got dropped off there numerous times because your parents needed a babysitter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, welcome to the crowd in the Midwest.
Yeah, but we all got up to all kind of. We were always doing stupid things, but our parents and our grandparents and our aunts and uncles never really. If they thought we were going too far, they kind of pull us back, but they really let us explore. I don't see a lot of that today, unfortunately.
Well, that's because they didn't. Well, they didn't know. As far as the online stuff goes, they didn't know. As far as the outside stuff goes, they knew kids would just be kids. As long as you didn't get run over by a car and not crossing the street, I think you were pretty good, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you came home for dinner, and were in before dark, all the basics.
You have all your limbs. Is everything generally still attached?
Is your homework done? Yeah, sure, Mom, it's done. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So all that to say that I think I ended up, I survived to 18, and I had a healthy curiosity. I was somewhat entrepreneurial. My parents like to tell stories of me taking, my little red wagon, and I'd fill it with rocks from the driveway, and I'd pick flowers out of people's, flower beds, and then ring the doorbell and sell it back to them. So I had this mix of, entrepreneurialism with engineering and creativity, and that sort of just that followed me through everything that I did. And I joined the Army out of high school.
Some of those stories about what have you been doing with your career? Because you have an interesting career.
Yeah, well, I set the stage for all that to say that I'm probably on my sixth career because I'm this infinitely curious person, and I like to tinker and I like to build and do things. And so I joined the Army out of high school, did military intelligence for a little while, left the Army, did some contracting, kind of stayed in the Defense Department, I ended up getting hired back into the Defense Department as a civilian, and I wound up as the Chief of Force Modernization for a Spooky Special Ops Unit, which is basically like a Chief Innovation Officer. So I had a $50 million a year R&D budget that I managed and designed and built. Like, that was probably the best job I've ever had. I had so much fun. My customers were these badass dudes that run around and do cool stuff, and I got to be their Q, and design all this cool stuff and deploy it. And eventually I left government. I kind of got back in. I decided to go into the entrepreneurial side and really kind of explore that. So I ended up starting a couple companies, only one of which made any money. So not wildly successful as an entrepreneur, but I had a lot of fun doing that. And one of those, I designed and built what I called a technology discovery lab, which later, I'd say, like, maker spaces kind of filled that void.
What's maker spaces?
Yeah, makerspace. So if you think about, like 3D printers or programming, like kind of supercomputers or anything that is, it's a pretty vast spectrum of engineering, creativity. Is
it a platform?
Has access, huh?
Is it a platform? Is it a company? Like,
no,
what is it?
It's a physical space, right?
Oh.
So think of it like a large physical sandbox where you can go play with technology and do cool things with very expensive pieces of hardware that are kind of bought and then made available to anybody. Like a Kinko's has.
I got you. So it's like a group. Was it owned by a group of people that just wanted to have like a creative playground for guys like you to be able to go in and like test things out? And was it for work or was it for fun?
So that's what those things have become, right? My first company, we built a lab that basically did an early version of that for customers in the Defense Department, right? So like the special ops guys could come to my office where no one's going to ask them who they are or where they're from, right? Because these are guys who that's a challenge for the spooky people. That used to be my job. I'd go to these conferences and people would be like, "So who are you? What do you do?" And I'd be like, "I do stuff. Tell me what you do. Let's not talk about."
I'm John. I'm a hangout hawk. See you later.
Yeah, right. And so it's very difficult. Like a lot of those. There's a community of people who need the bleeding edge tech, but they're disadvantaged in the fact that they can't go to the market and say, "Hi, I'm Bob. I kick doors down and shoot people in the face. Give me all your stuff," right? Like, it doesn't work that way. So you need a cutout. You need somebody that can be your proxy, and that was very difficult to do when I was in government. So I created a company that could basically do that on their behalf, and we sort of
smart.
Yeah, we sort of created this really cool tech space that would allow these guys to come in and run programs, do demos, and kind of be what is now sort of a maker space, have access to this technology that's expensive or hard to get. We would go do that on their behalf. So that was my first company, and then a whole bunch of I made every mistake you can make as a first-time entrepreneur. We only had one customer, right? We put all our eggs in one basket, and then budget cuts came, and our client got their budget wiped out, and so our budget got wiped out, and we got a little emotional about it. We made some emotional decisions. We kept all of our employees on full time with all their benefits because we wanted to take care of our people. Great idea, terrible business operation practice. So by the time we realized that this wasn't going to get turned around, it was too late. So I wound up, I ended up at Deloitte. I was very grateful for the opportunity to go to Deloitte, be a consultant, and after doing that for a couple of years, I got lucky to get roped into a small group that was starting to put together a blockchain practice for Deloitte Federal, and I had an absolute blast building out this blockchain service offering, and got to do blockchain 101 talks and was the speaker at a bunch of conferences and agencies. And
That part I understand. For the viewers at home, what is Deloitte? Because you talk about it like everybody should know what it is. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you're right. I my apologies. Deloitte.
That's all right.
I didn't know what a Deloitte was until I got there either. So it's a good catch. But so Deloitte is a management consulting agency, and one of the big four. There's a bunch of these. You may have heard of one of them, right? Like Ernst and Young, EY.
Yeah, Ernst and Young. So it's an accounting. It's like in the accounting in part, like big four, big six. Is there? It used to be big six?
It used to be big eight, and then I think it broke up. Now
they keep buying each other.
Somewhat. I think they segmented based on. So Deloitte's in the audit group. So they've been trying to rebrand themselves as kind of more broad, but
yeah. For us sales and marketing guys, we get bored with that stuff. So it's like I'm sure all my accounting friends listen. They're like, "Oh, we know what Deloitte is." Like, dude, that's awesome.
Anybody
they're like, I want to rock with John Tame, man.
Well, in fairness, I am not an audit guy. I don't know crap about tax. I have a tax guy. He's way smarter than I will ever be on this stuff. I joined the technology practice in Deloitte, but kept getting staffed on all these strategy projects, and kind of enjoyed it. So I sort of took a little detour. I've been on this strategy kick. I left Deloitte to go join a friend of mine's startup, who I'd convinced to start this company like 5 years prior, and she called me and was like, "Hey, I'm wanting to do some growth. Will you come be my chief strategy officer and kind of lead growth for us?" So I went and did that for a little while, and then wound up in the place that I am now. Same story. CEO called me and was like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to, I want to do a bunch of growth initiatives and could use your help. Will you come join the team?" And very recently, I've kind of gotten to the point where, and VeeCon, and we'll bring it back to the VeeFriends in the NFT space here. What I've realized is I've spent the past couple of years kind of playing in the strategy space, and I keep trying to do technology stuff in the strategy space, and I get a lot of resistance, understandably. And I've realized that I really miss the technology space, and so I'm hanging my hat up on the strategy side. A part of me going to VeeCon was figuring out like what move do I want to make back into the technology space, and I really want to go back into the Web3 stuff, because here comes the Web3 definition. I've been in the web from early days, like dial-ups, IRC, and I'm not going to explain what that is. People can go Google it. If you're younger than I am, you probably don't know what IRC is. But like early chat, all the stuff, right? And Web 1 was really people getting access to information. So it was places that have data, putting that data online and making it available for everybody. So like a read-only internet. And then Web 2 was sort of, they added the ability for anyone to write. So now we've got read and write. So now people can put whatever they want on the internet.
It's like the whole social media.
That's exactly right.
The whole like being able to post things, Reddit, all those, Yep.
Yeah,
that's exactly. I always have a hard time explaining to people. I just tell them it's generations. I say Web 2. I said Web 1 was till about 2004, 5-ish.
Yeah.
Well, I think
earlier maybe. I think that's up for debate, right? Because
whatever. But like it's that era, right? Like it's like the first 10 years. The last 15 years, and now the next 10 or 15 years.
And that's the right way to think about it, right? Like social web that's absolutely Web 2, because, and if you boil it down, I'm a big fan of Elon and first principles, right? The amount of time he talks about first principles, I think, is fantastic. And again, part of my growing up, right? Like very engineering mindset. I like to tinker and take things apart. I want to understand at the most basic level, how does this thing work? Though my mother lost a lot of vacuum cleaners and telephones, and because her son thought he was smarter than he actually was. 12-year-old thinks he's an engineer. He's going to take stuff apart, put it back together, and then it doesn't work anmore.
You just never put it back together, probably, right?
I don't know why I've got these extra parts that, they clearly weren't important. So
I want to ask you to take me a tour around your house to show me your hobby area, because your hobby area has probably got stuff all apart too, right?
Well, I mean, you could see it. I
For everybody listening, in their car right now, he's like in a little, like, I don't know if you're at home or at work office, but he's got this little table set up, and there's just like toolkits and tape. I see a roll of duct tape and like.
Yeah, it's just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I totally understand. That's why I just don't start anything anymore. Like it's because I know I leave such messes. I know, but I leave such messes behind me that I've learned that, like, all right, one thing at a time. I'm going to try to like dig in. So that's why I try to really just focus. Me personally, I focus on unpacking relationships and business and strategy from like a people side, because there's not stuff, there's not like, all this stuff that I got from the NFT space, like all these little trinkets and I got a button. I mean, like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Keep on going though, because this is fascinating. We got about, I don't know, a good 15 minutes left. Let's talk about VeeCon. Let's talk about NFTs, what you think the future is going to be like, and tell us about that.
Well, that ties right into that, finishing up that thought about Web3, right? So Web 1 was a few players created stuff that everybody could read. Web 2 was now everybody can write, so anybody can share anything, and that's the social web, and that's kind of where we are today. And I'd say the vision for Web 3, because it's not here yet. We're like in Web 2.1, in my opinion. But Web 3, the idea of Web 3 is really to give people digital ownership, right? So when you like, we're going to record this. I assume you're going to post this on like YouTube or whatever. Technically, YouTube owns that. Twitter owns your tweets. Facebook owns your posts. If they choose to turn you off, you can protest it. But like, if they don't choose to turn you back on, there's nothing you can do because it's their platform. They own it. Yeah. And so the idea, and this is probably where people have heard things like decentralization, right? And I think that's a word that gets abused a lot. I think.
We need decentralization with common sense regulation.
Yeah.
But no one wants to hear that.
No, not yet. We're in the hype cycle, right? If you look at we're very much in the
Wild West.
Yeah. So Web3 is really, if you think about the fact that no one owns any, well, it's not that no one owns, it's that there's a handful of really big corporations that own everything in Web 2. And Web 3 is, the idea is that individuals can own things in Web 3 and own things in a way that is tangible, right? Not just like, well, that's mine, but you don't actually own it, right? Like, those are my tweets. No, they're not. So the idea of Web 3 is that you can create content, you can put it on a blockchain, or it is indexed on a blockchain, and that is immutable, meaning it cannot be changed, it cannot be reversed, and so you then, in perpetuity, and it's transparent, you mentioned that word earlier, public blockchains, we should clarify. There are such things as private blockchains, those are not, hence the name. But for public blockchains, the transparency means that anybody can go look on that blockchain and see that Big Fish owns, this thing. This episode was added to the blockchain by Benjamin Fisher, and he is the owner. And here are all the other things that he owns. And that's the end of it, right? Like,
and if you wanted to come and buy this episode because you thought this episode was so much value, you had a bigger vision for this episode, you can come to me right on the eBay, it's called OpenSea for the people at home, and like, you can make me an offer if I don't have it listed. Because it's on the blockchain, you can literally just make me an offer, and if I have emails tied to my OpenSea account, I can see that offer. You can try to track me down. You can try to figure out how to buy it, or I could just list it and say, hey, man, we're going to sell this episode for $10,000, and hey, buddy, it's yours. And then guess what? Jonathan then can do something with that episode, build a community around the episode. That could have been the mothership of whatever he starts in the Web3, and that could be collectible to someone. That could be like really valuable to someone. He could sell it to them for $100,000. Jonathan would get the $100,000. Ben Fisher would get a 10% royalty, would still get $10,000 because of the royalty. So the original creator keeps making money in perpetuity. And that's the exciting part that I like as a businessman, as a sales guy, marketing guy of the blockchain and Web3.
And that's a great analogy, and explains why artists and musicians are flocking to the NFT community right now, because that distribution model has been broken for so long, right? Like,
yeah, there's always a manager
go find an artist that says, go find an artist who says anything good about their record label, right?
Right. Yeah, but go find an artist that actually knows how to produce music and actually get it out to the mainstream, though. They need each other.
Yeah,
so
sure.
This idea of like creative people also being salesmen and marketing people, like we all need each other. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, and I think a lot of times, people don't realize that. They'll realize it though.
That's a really great point, and this is a good opportunity to maybe dig into that word decentralization a little bit more, right? Like in Web 2 and prior, right now, the primary model for artists and musicians to put their thing out is through some centralized intermediary, right? And when we talk about, and I think you and I are on the same page here, when we talk about decentralization, I don't subscribe to this anarchic, this version of decentralization that's like nobody owns anything except what they want, because that doesn't work. Like you still need distribution, you still need channels, you still need marketing and awareness. Just they don't need to own 100% of it in the art, or 99% of it, and the artists own one. Like the decentralization for me is let the artist own 60-70% of their work, and let the distribution own 10%. Let the the marketing folks, let them get 5 to 10%. Let the business operations side of the house get 10%. Let's make it equitable. Let's make it fair.
What do you think? What do you want to do? What do you think you want to do in this space after being a VeeCon? Or like, what was your VeeCon experience like? Tell the people what the VeeCon was like for you.
Yeah, I think we've been having this talk a lot, and I think as a VeeFriends experience, it was a 10 out of 10. Like this was. The community was fantastic. I met a ton of people. Everywhere I went, I was meeting somebody. And everybody was high energy, great engagement. People were talking about, not just the VeeFriend stuff. It wasn't a nonstop, what VeeFriend do you have? And let's compare and let's talk about the things that we like. It was all inclusive, right? Like talking about careers, family. The number of people that I told about, my wife is doing a startup, the number of people that I told about her startup and they would get excited about it. It was just, I'm glad Gary chose to put the word friends in his community name, because that's really what it became. I'm on like 2 or 3 different group chats now with people that I met at VeeFriends that we're legitimately friends in a weekend, right? So, I think the conference, it was a first. This is the first VeeCon conference. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I jokingly called it LineCon, or StareCon.
If you chose to do that, I'll just tell you this. The only line I stood in was for I had to wait maybe 5 minutes for an ice cream cone.
But you're a big deal, okay?
I'm not a big deal.
Who the hell I am.
I'm not a big deal. What do you mean? I'm just not waiting. I just chose to mingle at different spots rather than sitting and we'll spend 3 hours in line for an autograph or a picture. And I'm not, but listen, I'm not talking bad about anything, but that's what you chose to do. So I look at it as well, that freed up space. That freed up space that talks for me to go sit in that.
You're welcome. I was doing my part, buddy.
Yeah, we're all in this together, man.
But let me make this point to exactly what you're talking about, just to illustrate how powerful this community was. I did a selfie with Gary just because I waited in line for 2 hours. But the point was, I've met Gary before. I met him at South by Southwest in 2014. I've got signed stuff from him. Great. I didn't wait in line to get anything signed. Not that I don't care. I waited in line because I was having fantastic conversations with the people who wanted to get their merch signed because they wanted to flip it.
I agree.
I'll stand there for 2 hours for no reason other than I'm just having a great time hanging out with these other cats that are like me, and it was a good conversation.
So guess what I did? So what I did was I saw that line, and I would go to the front of the line, and I would interview everybody. I'm like, how long have you guys been staying here? How long have you been doing this? Tell me why you're here. What VeeFriend do you have? And some of them had VeeFriends, some of them had VeeFriends too. Some of them didn't have any. Some of them just had a VeeCon ticket. And then I would get enough information there, and I thought I was good. And then I would go back about 10 more feet. And I literally would just go with the line, and I would mingle in the line without. I was in line, but I wasn't in the line. But that's me. That's what I like to do, you know. So
I mean,
I
it's
like
great.
quick
You got
conversations.
a captive audience. You're
Well,
not going anywhere.
they can't leave me. It was great for the video camera that I had following me around. So,
Awesome.
what do you tell me a little bit about your wife's project, real quick? We got about 5 to 10 minutes left.
Perfect. This is a shameless plug here.
That's all right. This is what we're all about here.
Yeah, let me preface all of this by saying that, and I don't think anyone will argue with me. I married way up. My wife is brilliant, and so she is. She only recently came out of government. Her entire career up until very recently has been in government. She started at the CIA. She went to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. She was on the Hill for a while on the House Permanent Select Committee for Intelligence. She went to the Defense Intelligence Agency, and so she wound up. She kind of got,
She got a demotion marrying you.
Huh?
She got a demotion marrying you. I'm just kidding.
She did, really.
Behind every great man is even a better woman, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm smarter than her on is that I chose marry up, and I think she is, I don't know.
What's her name?
She sees in me, we'll figure out the one day. But so she ended up. She was on the Hill. She wrote some legislation that really kind of mandated artificial intelligence be used for. She's a policy expert. She's got 3 master's degrees in policy. One of them is national security policy from the Naval War College. She's just next level smart. So she's had this idea in her head for a long time, 10 years. She's been trying to build an AI tool. Policy and regulation is this wickedly complex space. Policy, law, rules, all this stuff is written in legalese, which is not English. The common layperson cannot go read regulation and comprehend it. Not really. And these things are interconnected. There are dependencies. You've got to figure out how this regulation derives from some U.S. code and has, interdependencies with these rules or laws over here and this international treaty and then these, statutes. And so and then a president will sign an executive order that conflicts with 3 other things, but nobody knew that because there's so much regulation, paperwork, and it's impossible for any humans to have a good grasp.
Yeah, we got politicians that are really just good salespeople that are out. Which, listen, I'm a salesperson. It's easier for us to get elected than it is for the smart people to get elected. Unfortunately,
It's true.
But and the problem of it is trying to. Your wife talking to me about all that stuff after she probably went through about 2 minutes of it. I'd probably be. Right? Because at the end of the day, it's important stuff, but it's important.
It's super important, right? Especially in this Web3 space, we are going to get regulated. Period. End of story. It's going to happen. The question is, what does that regulation look like? And if we do nothing, the fear is that they're just going to copy and paste the regulations that already exist for other sectors, and they're going to layer that on top of what we're doing, and it'll kill what we're trying to do. We need that. The old regulation was designed for an old way of thinking and an old way of doing stuff. We need new modern regulations, and we need to get rid of some of the old stuff. Some of the old stuff needs to come off the books. It's no longer relevant. The problem
Jonathan Tame for president, baby. You heard it here first. We're making the announcement.
I don't want the job.
So tell us what's your wife's first name?
Jacqueline Tame.
Jacqueline Tame. Now what's the project? Give me a quick 2 minutes on the project.
So her new thing is called GameBreaker. It is a version of, she built this tool. She left government as the deputy director for the DoD's Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, the JAIC. So she was.
I want to see that business card. Holy cow!
Yeah, she's a big deal. So she got this project built while she was at the JAIC, but it was specifically for the defense community. And they did it, as a first-time project. They did some things that were specific to defense language and defense organizations that don't make a lot of sense if you tried to use that tool anywhere else. So when she left government, she's really trying to build that tool now in the commercial space so that everybody has access to it. So that project is called GameBreaker. You can go to GameBreaker.AI. Say again?
Is there a website?
GameBreaker.AI.
.ai.
Yep. There's not much there yet, but she's going to build an AI tool that's basically Google for policy and regulation. A mix of like a Google search engine where you can ask a question about, regulation or policy, and then eventually kind of a recommendation engine where if you're a business, for example, if you're a business and you're trying to like look at what Elon did with Tesla, right? Like, hey, I'm going to build a gigafactory. He had to pay a team of lawyers, and they spent I don't know how much money and how much time to basically look at every state and figure out which state is most advantageous to build this gigafactory in before they settled on Austin. Her tool would give you the same answer in, press
because it would just take all the information that's all over the place, condense it, and then be able to search it, code, and then the computers will be able to get that information faster. How is she going to build it? How does she have a team of people? Does she have to get funding? Like, does she have a bunch of rich friends in Washington that'll give her money for this? How does that all work?
So she actually had started fundraising, and then, the market is not great right now for first-time entrepreneurs doing startups.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Terrible timing. So she's going to put that on pause for a little bit. We're also about to have our first kid.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So she was on a little bit of a tight timeline to begin with, and basically it looked like she was going to be able to raise, in not favorable terms, but if she had raised money, it was basically just going to be enough to keep the team alive until right after she finished maternity leave, and then she'd have to go do another raise again, and we have no idea what the market's going to look like. So she's going to take a pause on that for a little bit, but I expect that to start back up into this year, maybe early next. In the meantime, I'm working with her team. We're playing around with the idea of taking the idea of GameBreakers, or GameBreaker, the tool, and creating an NFT community around the idea of game breakers, right? Because everybody in Web3 is essentially a game breaker, right? We all know that every game is rigged. The financial game is rigged. The regulatory game is rigged. The startup funding game is rigged. Let's break it. And so
dude, that's a great way to close the show too. Like, let's break it. I want to do another podcast with you. I got a lot more. I mean, you are a fascinating guy. But I got a call. I got to jump on in 2 minutes. So let me really quick speed round. Tell me your favorite book.
Oh, favorite book. Childhood favorite book was The Wind in the Willows.
So if you were going to an island, that's what you take with you?
Probably. It's just such it's a nostalgia thing. I read that a bunch of times as a kid.
Sweet. How about your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Man, that's a tough one.
Going to an island, you're never coming back. What movie are you taking with you?
Iron Man.
All right. What about your favorite restaurant? So you can put a restaurant on your island. Which restaurant would it be?
So I can't pronounce it because my French is terrible. But there's this French restaurant out in the sticks in Virginia where we used to live. I'll send you a link. But anybody that's in Fairfax, in the area around Fairfax, Virginia, there's a French restaurant out in the middle of nowhere. It's
How do you even Google it? I mean, like, if you don't know, because it's probably
my wife speaks fluent French, so I just tell her, hey.
Right. Hey, well, who's your favorite person?
Favorite person, man, that's a
yeah.
I'm a
if
big
you want to
fan.
if you wanted to spend a day with a person, who would it be? The whole day. Pick their brain, learn from them.
I just like Christopher Walken. I think he's a fascinating
My
character.
God,
right? You know.
That's cool, man. Where's your favorite travel destination?
I've always wanted to go to the Maldives.
There you go. Somebody on my Twitter or Instagram, somebody's there right now. I can't remember who it is.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I looked at that. Marriott, it was really expensive for me to get over there, but I know our buddy Legendo Gary in the Hangout Hawks, he lives closer over there, right? Than John Hall, those people in Australia, Japan, like that's kind of over that way somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, listen, Mr. Tame, it was really, really awesome to hang out with you today and do this podcast, and I appreciate your time and definitely want to get you back on the show sometime. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Benny.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.